Okie dokie. Hopefully, I'm coming out live. Just going to check on YouTube, and hopefully, people will join me. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. There we go. Excellent. So, I'm going to give it a minute. Let people join. And make sure that you can hear me okay. I'm always concerned about that. I've done lives in the past where I'm chatting away and normally nobody can hear me. So hopefully I'm coming out live. Let's make sure. And if you can just post a comment in YouTube, that'd be brilliant. Just to let me know that you can hear me okay. That'd be amazing. So let's just make sure. Cool. So whilst people are joining, and hopefully you can hear me, let me know that you can. And hopefully you've picked up some of the live sessions that we've done this week and the challenges in dog sports. So I'm going to give it a moment. Let's see if anybody can hear me. Let's just check. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Okay. Hopefully I'm coming out live. I'm going to risk it. I think I am coming out live. So let me test on. Yeah, excellent. So there we go. All righty. So welcome those of you that joined me and pick this up retrospectively. So day 5 of the challenges in dog sports. All this week, I've been talking about some of the challenges that can happen in dog sports and giving you ideas and food for thought as to how to overcome those challenges. Those challenges can be to do with training or they can be to do with yourself. And I've talked about various topics this week. So on Monday, I talked about, let me just get my notes up. I talked about the importance of your mental game and the things that can happen to cause you to lack confidence in a competition environment and when you're embarking on this journey into dog sports. Self-talk, for example, the things that we tell ourselves that ultimately undermine our own self-belief and our own confidence. Using techniques to improve that, visualization, breathing techniques, all can help you deliver when it most matters, which is in competition. So I talked about that as my day 1 topic. So again, if you haven't picked it up, I'll go back and check that out. They're on my YouTube page and obviously on Facebook. You can pick them up as to the various discussions. On day 2, I talked about the classic issue that lots of people have, which is their dog not performing in competition as they do at home, and how that can create a discrepancy. And I went through the 10 points that you need to cover or ask yourself, 10 questions to ask yourself to evaluate what the core issue is with your dog and why they aren't ultimately doing as you asked them to do in competition. And then we moved on day 3 to talk about perfection paralysis versus overzealous estimation. So estimating your dog's understanding and therefore putting them into competition before they're ultimately ready. And as a result of that, finding gaps in their understanding. And the other polar opposite of the spectrum is perfection paralysis, reluctant to move on because you're in the pursuit of it being absolutely perfect and realizing actually their dogs, often their perfection is in our head and not theirs. And it's about finding that balance between those two ends of the spectrum. And yesterday, I talked about overcoming adversity. I spoke with my good friend, Kat Farrant, student and long-term obedience competitor and now IGP competitor, who talked about her own journey of overcoming adversity. She talked about her experience with Shanti, her Australian Shepherd, and how she was at a crossroads with her at a pivotal point, and how she had to really evaluate her reason for engaging in dog sports in the first place. And I talked about my journey with my boxer Punch and overcoming adversity to eventually succeed in the sport that I intend him to partake in. And success is subjective. It's down to your own personal goals and your own personal successes. So hopefully you've had a chance to pick those lives up previously. Obviously, if you haven't had a chance, go back and have a look at them. There's some great advice and great points to consider when you are embarking on this journey into dog sports, whether you are a person that's been doing it for decades, like myself, who's been doing it for over 30 years, or somebody that's just starting out in their career into dog sports, or if you're watching this and you're intrigued about what dog sports is. There's some great information in the last 5 days that will hopefully help you really get the best out of your experience within dog sports. So all this week and continuing move forward, my 2 online courses are going to be open: Obedience Fanatics and Heel Work. And I've totally changed the course. It's gone over to a new platform, Mighty Network. Some of you may be familiar with that format. And they're both the courses are open, as is my VIP access. And that's now standard for anybody that signs up. So if you partake in dog sports and you are interested in signing up, I will share the link and you can do so. It's a fantastic group of people where there's people that participate in obedience, agility, working trials, IGP, Heel Work to Music, Rally-O. I've lost track, scent work. There's a plethora of different sports within that group, and all competing from raw beginners that have never done dog sports before to high-end world championship level competitors, and they're achieving great things in their respective sports. So if you want to be part of that community, have me as your coach, get feedback from me about what you're doing with your dog and dog sports, feel free to join that group. So today I'm going to be talking about strategic competing and intentional planning for your dog sports career. So, and what does that basically mean? That is, how do I compete with my dog? How do I plan my competitive year? And how do I plan my dog's competitive career? And obviously, as a good friend says, coined the brilliant phrase, plans should be set in sand and goals should be set in stone. In that, plans and how you get there can sometimes deviate and fluctuate based on various things: the dog, its health, life, this calendar. We suddenly have a pandemic that throws everything out of kilt. And your goal should not be steered. Your goal for your dog and what you're trying to achieve should be your North Star for you to strive for. And as I said yesterday, sometimes those goals don't come to be, but it's about looking at what is the goal for that dog given the circumstances and for you as an individual. So how do I compete with my dogs? How do I advise my students and my mentees to compete with their dogs? And that in itself is quite a meaty conversation, and it's quite a topic to discuss in itself. So I thought I'd share with you some of the advice and the guidance that I give them. So when people embark on this world of dog sports and they ask me to be their coach, one of the early questions that I'll have a conversation with them or offer them is, what is it that you want to achieve for this dog? What's your goal? Because often if we don't have some sort of goal in mind, it's really hard to plan out that dog's career and the timeline that we need to be working towards. Now, as I said, those things can fluctuate based on life, based on health, based on things that can get in your way. But it's really good to have some sort of idea of what you're aiming for. So when they get a dog and they decide, it would obviously be dependent on the sport that they're doing with the dog, the breed of dog that they have, the age of the dog, the background, etc. So if they had a dog that had been, for example, a rehome dog or a rescue dog that they got older and they wanted to succeed in dog sports, we might have to be realistic about the timeline and depending on the age of the dog. And it's not to say that they can't achieve great things, but we need to think about how much we progress, how quickly we progress. Versus a puppy, we might have a longer timeline for our dog to be competitive. And depending on the sport, there might be a criteria that dog has to meet, i.e. an age or a prerequisite test before the dog can compete. So all those things would be taken into consideration. In the preparation phase of taking your dogs to dog sports, it's really important that you think about environmental training, taking your dogs to those environments and starting to condition them to feel a certain way within those environments. And ideally what we want is the dog to be comfortable. So we don't want the dog to be concerned and worried or overwhelmed by the environment. In the same way, we don't want the dog to be overstimulated and aroused by the environment. And that's something that a lot of people can fall foul to. And I'm going to expand on that further in this conversation tonight. So we want to be thinking about the dog first and foremost being comfortable in the environment and largely indifferent to the environment. So they just look at it as another location that they can attend with their owner, and they can do the things that they would normally do over the park or in the garden. So we're looking for the dog to be focused and engaged. And again, I talked about this on the second day two's conversation where I talked about the difference between home and away. So that would be a massive amount of work in itself, getting the dog comfortable in environments where they will eventually be competing. So once we've done that and we started to train our dog, we feel the day is ready, where the dog is ready to compete in terms of its understanding, in terms of its confidence, in terms of its the age requirements. Say, for example, if it does agility or working trials or IGP, there's an age requirement for which the minimum age the dog must be. We've met all that stuff and we're thinking about competing. So you need to decide for yourself, and that might be dictated by the age of the dog, where your dog is going to make its debut. And I would always urge my students and my mentees to consider that first exposure you had. So the prerequisite would be that the dog is comfortable in the environment, the dog has been trained in the environment, the dog is happy in the environment, and the dog is ready now to actually compete. We've done all the foundation elements. So we want to make sure that the test that we ask the dog, and sometimes you might not have that option. Say, for example, in IGP, it's a set test, but in obedience and in agility and in working trials, the tests can change. So we first want to pick a judge or an event or a show or a competition where we know either that we know the environment or we know the judge, ideally both. And we want to be thinking about that first step onto that ladder. And we want that experience to be as positive as we possibly can. So we want the test that we ask our dog to be really straightforward, nice and easy for that dog. We want the judge to be somebody that we're comfortable with, and we know that are certainly not going to do anything that we feel might be contradictory to our training. And we want to be thinking about the experience the dog has in that first occasion when we're competing. So it isn't at this stage about winning per se or succeeding. It's about the dog and you having that first attempt and being as positive as it possibly can. Now, I've had dogs that have gone in and won first time out, and I've had dogs that have been placed, and then they've eventually, a couple of shows in, they've won out that respective class. It's more about me giving the dog the first exposure. The win or the qualification will come as a byproduct of that dog being confident in that environment and you being confident in that environment. So you want to be thinking about that first experience that the dog has and making sure that the odds are in your favor. And it may be that you have that competition booked, and when you get there, the environment is inappropriate. That they might have, I don't know, had lots of rain, or they might the course might not be to your liking, or the situation might not be quite correct. In which case, you can choose. You can have several options. You can choose to scrap and pull the dog. You can choose to do your own thing in that situation. Use it to your gains, obviously, depending on the sport that you do. There's many options that you can consider. So once we've started the process of competing, the way in which I would bring my dogs through, certainly into the type level, is to be very strategic about how I compete with them. I personally don't want to over compete with them in their formative stages, because it's about them having the not just experience, but the right experience. A classic challenge or a classic belief system is that the dog needs experience. And a dog can have a lot of experiences, but if they're not great ones, then that's going to be counterproductive to the long-term plan. So I want to be thinking about making sure the dog has a positive experience. It doesn't have any long-term problems that will creep into their competing at that formative stage. So obviously, some things are beyond our control. It might be that, a dog barks in the distance and our dog gets concerned about that. That's one of those things that we obviously, whilst we could train for, there may be a level of risk that we take. A dog randomly runs into the ring, and that's, one of those things that can happen. Now, ideally, obviously, we hope that doesn't happen, and we hope that we've done our groundwork to prevent it happening. But ideally, that's where we should be mindful of the environment that we take them in, the layout of the show, the show itself, or the event, the trial itself. We want to be thinking about all those things before we put our dog in that situation. Once we start competing, obviously our goal is to get our qualification or wins or passes, depending on what sport that you partake in. And we want to be thinking about how much competing that we're doing. Remember, I talked about earlier in the week, your competitive journey with your dog is like a bank account. It's really important that you put investment into that bank account, so every now and again you can take withdrawals out. A lot of people will compete a high ratio in that formative period of their dog's development. And I've done that in the past. I've competed quite a lot with my young dogs, or relatively more than I do now. And my experience has been that often as can be when long-term problem will be established, and it takes then a lot of work. If you have an issue that gets established in your dog's formative years, that can remain with the dog throughout its whole career. So, and it's really important that you are hyper vigilant to your dog having any unwanted experiences or negative experiences that knock their confidence. So when your dog starts to compete, and certainly with dogs that partake in a sport that's quite self-reinforcing, field trials, working trials, agility, IGP, we want to be thinking about what is the dog learning when we start to compete with them. And we want to be thinking about how much competing that we're doing, or how much exposure the dog is having to the thing that's going to really excite them. And that's where you can often see that, certainly with a sport like agility, for example, the temptation is when the dog is of age, 18 months, 2 years old, to expose them to a lot of competing, or to, to do a full season with them. Now, the big thing that you have to consider is, what is the dog learning in terms of its emotional state? What is the dog learning in terms of its arousal? What habits is the dog forming? Because that's really, really crucial, especially if the dog is of a younger age and they are entering adolescence. So an 18-month-old dog is going to be smack bang in the middle of adolescence, and we've got to think of that as an underlying factor. So if I have a really sensitive dog, a female dog, and she's doing season around that sort of time span, which could often be the case, and she has a fright at a show because of her hormones, that can become a long-established problem if I'm not mindful of that experience. So we really want to consider and always put our dog's confidence at the primary center of any decision that we make. When we compete with our dog, as I said, we're always taking a little bit out of that bank account. We want to be reflecting constantly about, what is the dog learning? Am I maintaining criteria? Am I shifting criteria? Am I allowing things to break down? Am I maintaining those behaviors back at home? So we need to be thinking about the dog's exposure in that environment and not have any unwanted behaviors creep in. So it could be that your agility dog starts to go to agility shows and they start to learn about the fun that can be had at agility shows, and the dog starts to get a bit excited going to ringside. And then that bleeds into the dog parking up at the car park and realizing there's agility going on. And then that bleeds into the dog turning up at the venue and getting really over aroused. So by the time fast track 2 or 3 years down the line, you want to compete with the dog at a high level. If you haven't taken note of those things, what can happen is the dog, you can create a long established problem, but it's been created in that formative stages. So we really want to be cautious about how much exposure we give our dog in that pivotal period of development. So if I see little issues arising, I need to be really, really proactive on having a plan of action. And certainly with dogs that partake in sports that are self-reinforcing, excuse me, got a sneeze brewing there. You really want to take note of the dog's behavior at the environment, at the show, at the trial, and so forth, and what is the dog starting to display. Because the difficulty of that is, if the dog starts to have an association with that particular environment, unless you are committed or able to put in remedial work and training rounds and reinforcement in that environment, you will very quickly establish a problem. So my preference with competing is to be very deliberate. So I tend to build towards a particular goal. It might be one event, or it might be a flurry of events. I will dip my toe in the water. I will gauge where my dog is in terms of the training. I will have an attempt in competing. Hopefully, I will achieve whatever it is that I want to do at that moment, get the win, get the qualification, get the pass, whatever the case may be. And then I will pull back, and I will, because I might have a flurry, because it could be that your dog has a little faux pas on one occasion and misses an opportunity, misses a sit, or, has a bar down, or, breaks the stay in trials, whatever the case may be. But the dog has a missed opportunity. You want one relatively soon after, so that you can keep the momentum up. the hope is that you've prepared the dog sufficiently and you don't want to miss that opportunity by not having another show for 6 months. So you want to be thinking about that. Now, obviously, this is all dependent on the assumption that you can get to events regularly. For those of you that can't, then you need to be really, really mindful of how you prep your dog to go into competition. So it means then doing a lot of proprietary work, taking the dog to lots of random locations where there are people and ideally dogs, and working on your foundation skills. The dog's ability to switch on, the dog's ability to focus, the dog's ability to do the behaviors without reinforcement. You could do all that training at a boot fair. You could do that at your local supermarket. You could do that at the local park. So by the time that if you are limited on your competing, when you do attend a show, the dog has had so much environmental work, it's likely to do the behaviors and perform the behaviors as per your training. So hopefully that all makes sense. So when you start competing, you always need to be evaluating what your dog does in competition versus the criteria that you would normally have at home. So if you're really, really diligent and you're really fastidious about your start line criteria, if you go to shows and you start to allow criteria shifts, that's when very quickly the dog can be developed. So the dog can develop into what would be deemed as a ring-wise dog. And actually what the dog has just picked up on is a shifting criteria. So we need to be really, really committed to our long-term goal. And often when you bring young dogs through the classes, irrespective of the sport, the temptation is to compete and to enjoy that aspect, which is absolutely fine. But always think of the bigger picture. Where is it that you're trying to head to? What goal are you working towards? And what are you trying to master or achieve with that dog? So always have that in the back of your mind. Now, often in dog sports, there is, you might have big events that you're working towards. So you need to factor that into your planning, where you can allow a 6-week period before an event where you're prepping the dog. And that would be physical preparation, that would be training preparation, that would be your preparation, that would be your mental game, is all being factored into that 6-week, generally for me it's 6 weeks before an event. If it's a dog debuting in competition, if it's a dog going to a big event, if it's a dog just competing at a championship level, it doesn't matter. I would allow that sort of time period. And within that, I'd be thinking about what exposure the dog needs, what sort of ratio of training versus chaining, where I'm actually doing run-throughs, the dog would need, and I would consider all of that as part of my preparation. So when you go to competition, all you are doing is assessing what your dog's training, is looking like, and you're always evaluating your training. What often people will do is the dog will do things in a competition, and they will either have a knee-jerk reaction and train in something that isn't there, or they won't see the subtle changes, and then 6 months down the line they have a huge problem. And they then want to fix it. So always look at, again, I urge all my students to video their training sessions and video their competing, so they can reflect on that and to note what it is that the dog is doing, the dog's attitude, the dog's emotional state, the dog's criteria, what the criteria for behaviors, and your role in that process. Is there anything that you're doing that might be creating a precedence or a discrepancy in the dog's understanding? So thinking about how you bring a dog through the preliminary levels to the level that you eventually want to aim to is really, really important when you're talking about dog sports. And it's one that often people don't consider the detail within it. Further to that, when you have a dog at that high level, thinking about your dog's criteria, thinking about its emotional state, thinking about the ratio of competing that you need to do. So if you're working towards a particular goal, if you're trying to get the dog on a national team, if you're trying to go for a big event or a qualifying event, you need to factor that into your time scale of what you need to do when. That would also mean putting in other opportunities to reinforce the dog in environments where, or similar to, or ideally the environment that you're competing in. Obviously, if you don't have the opportunity based on the sport you do to do training rounds or reinforcing the ring, you need to replicate that. So that might be factored into your preparation time. You might be thinking about recreating that environment with friends and etc., where you can replicate it. Get a group of friends, hire a field, put the equipment up, do a run through, and reinforce the dog, or to deal with whatever underlying issues that you might have. And you want to be thinking about things like, driving a certain distance, because that's a trigger that the dog can, leaving the dog in the car, finding out that, as you would at a competition, you might go and book your dog in, or walk your courses, or make yourself known to the officials. Whatever the case may be, you would do all those things as you would normally. Get the dog out, let it out for the toilet break, warm it up, put it back in your vehicle, and then you would go through your little pre-competition routine. So it's really important that you would rehearse that in environments where you can reinforce the dog, and you can use the various pieces of information that you would normally do in training, but in an environment that looks very, very similar to competition. So I don't know if there's any questions from anybody. Feel free to ask. I'm just going to give it a moment while I have a coffee, slurp my coffee, and scratch my very itchy nose, which is typical. My hay fever. I know nobody has hay fever, but mine's just playing up a little bit with the good weather. So not sure if anybody has any questions. Let's have a quick look on Facebook. Hang on. Let's have a look. Okay. Okay. I don't think there's any questions thus far. So, strategic competing and preempting problems. So, again, another classic challenge that people can experience is when a small, significant behavior can become a massive, massive problem in the dog's early career. How do you remedy that? So a very, very common example would be agility dogs that are starting their formative competing, and when they are learning about the arousal or they're developing arousal issues in those environments. Sorry. So it's really critically important that you, hang on a second, are aware of your dog's criteria, your dog's emotional state in those environments, and start to be proactive. So if you have a dog that's likely to exhibit those traits, you want to be thinking about other events, as I said, boot fairs, etc., other dog events. Take your agility dog to an obedience show or rally-o or even a breed show, and start to desensitize them and counter condition them to the triggers within that environment, i.e. a mass of people and dogs, and the dog isn't necessarily getting over aroused if they're just trotting around a breed dog ring, because the dogs will obviously be moving. So you're adding a level of distraction, but not to the point of where it being fast and furious and running around and really excited dogs. So you can use other dog sports to help you with your dog sport. So for example, if you have an obedience dog and you want to start to expose it to environments, maybe the dog needs more exposure, you could take it to an agility show or a rally show or a breed show. You could take it there and do some training in the corner in preparation for going into competition. So it's really important that you think laterally about how you bring your dog through the classes, and how you bring them through in a way that avoids any long established problems developing. So often we can find that issues that most dogs or a lot of dogs have are later on, you can see them learning those things in the formative parts of their career. Now, lots of people want to compete a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we always want to be thinking about the balance between the dog competing and withdrawals being made out of that bank account, and the dog maintaining criteria as we've trained in our formative stages. And again, think about your long-term goals. For me, goal setting is a huge part of dog sports. We want to try and think of a goal, and it can be a personal goal that will motivate us sufficiently to want to go out there and train our dogs. And that, at the end of the day, is a huge part of it. As I'd love to, and again, social media is great at creating quick fix, do this in 3 easy steps. And that's a great thing to get attention. It's a great thing for marketing. It's a great thing to spread the good word. But at the end of the day, you need to be committed. You need to be putting the work in, and that will take time. So chipping away at your training is really, really important. When you're working towards a goal, the goal has to motivate you to want to train the dog, even when you might want to sit and watch television, or you are a little bit tired at work or after work, or it gives you a desire to go, right, I want to achieve that goal. I can have it in my sight, and I want to aim towards it. And it really is something that motivates me. I want to achieve that, that calling the dog a champion, or I want to get the dog to that big event, or I want to get on the national team, whatever the case may be. It has to be something that motivates you. Often when people find that their dogs, they have a struggle or an adversity, like we discussed yesterday, it's those moments where you need something that really, really does motivate you to keep you going. And it's really important to have that in your mind. Even if it's just to achieve a particular skill, it will help you structure your training accordingly. I urge everybody to keep some sort of record of their training so that they know what they're working on and they can make systematic progress towards their training goals. Okay, I think there's a question from Yvonne. Let's have a look. So this is more about her specific dog, who I know, little Dash. Went to an outdoor coffee shop today, got settled on mat and table. He gave focus, still not wanting to play. Should I have got up and moved more? Yeah, ideally, if possible. But in that instance, I would probably do what you would normally do at class, for example. Just let him take the world in. As long as he's not focusing on anything that's inappropriate, let him just take the environment in, and that would be your little project. 5 minutes at a coffee shop, let him take the world in, and go back there several times if you can. And then you can start to initiate some play, exactly how you did at class. So again, he's acclimatizing to the environment. Just allow him that space to figure it out, pop him back in the van or the car, get him out, do a bit more with him and let him figure it out. And then over time, just to make the suggestions of play, get his favorite toy or food, see if he'll engage with food first, and then transition back to toy play. All right. So hopefully that's answered the question. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions about planning and strategic competing. Or alternatively, any of the topics that I've covered in the 5 lives this week. So mental game, perfection paralysis or overestimated assumptions, overcoming adversity, and your dog transitioning its training from home to away, and planning. If you've got any questions on any of those 5 things that's been covered all this week, by all means, pop them on the chat and I can pick them up. So whilst people are thinking of their questions that they want to ask, again, if you're interested in signing up for either Obedience Fanatics, which is my online course, which focuses on foundation skills and all the preliminary obedience exercises that will underpin the majority of dog sports, whether it's an obedience dog or agility dog, an IGP dog, a Mondio dog, the Obedience Fanatics course will cover any of the skills that you need. It will cover shaping, foundation play skills, foundation play, food skills, all the specific behaviors to do with all those exercises. Additionally, the heel work course looks specifically at my approach to teaching heel work, which has taken people to Crufts, winning Crufts, world championships, and I'm really proud of the achievements that they've had using these methods, reinforcement-based methods to achieve great things. So if you are interested in signing up for either of the courses, I will share a link in the group, in the chat. The addition to that is anybody that joins up now automatically gets to be part of my VIP Facebook group, where they can effectively have me as their coach and mentor to guide them through the training process with their own dog. In that group, there is a massive amount of like-minded people. Kat is on there as a participant, and you can submit videos for feedback from me directly and be privy to webinars and specific information only presented on that group. So if you're interested about any of the signing up, I will share that information in the chat. I don't know if there's any questions before I draw things to a close. A little bit of a shorter one today. just talking about planning and strategic competing. Remember to think about your greater plan that you're aiming for and your goals. Use that to guide you in the decisions that you're making about your dogs competing. Be really selective and specific about the experiences your dog has in that formative stage of competing, because that's going to set the tone for the rest of their career. If you see an issue emerging, make sure that you put that as a priority and forsake some of the competitive opportunities for the greater gain, which is to have a dog that's confident, happy, and can reliably perform in competition. Let's see what Donna's question. With the theory progress, not perfection, what happens when neither are being made? No real progress and definitely not perfection. So I would review your foundation skills. And obviously, Donna, if you're in a position to sign up for the courses, I can absolutely help you with either of those challenges. So if your dog is not making progress, first thing I would evaluate is what you're doing in your training. What is your criteria? What is your reinforcement? What is your reinforcement placement? Look at that sort of stuff, okay? And when you're making progress, are you keeping a training journal? Are you making a log of your training, either with a smartphone, video recording, iPad, whatever, to video your training session so you can look at your training and review it? And also, are you being clear enough with your criteria? So it may be that you need to look at it holistically, look at all areas of your training and evaluate those key things. Reinforcement, criteria, mechanical skills is another massive one, and timing, looking at those bits to see if the dog is not making progress because the information needs to be clearer. And if you're not attaining perfection or even near to it, again, how clear are you being in your communication? If all of that fails and you feel that you're doing all the right things and you still aren't making headway, then look at the dog's physical well-being. Can the dog physically do what you want them to do? Is the dog's reluctance to train because there's an underlying physical issue that they're trying to communicate to you and hasn't been picked up? So consider all those things. And again, if you're interested in coaching, Donna, I can share the link and you can definitely get some direction. It could simply be that you're not having somebody to give you direction. That's another massive reason why people don't make progress and they get stuck on perfection paralysis, is because they don't have an objective eye to say, yep, that's good enough, move it on, do this. Or no, actually, you need to consolidate that bit, go back, work on this piece of the puzzle. And that's where having a coach who has an understanding of training, who is an expert in that specific field, can guide you. And we all need that. We all need that person in our corner. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions, but thank you for yours, Donna. So I'll give it a moment. So for me, dog sports has been, a huge part of my life for 30 years, more than 30 years. And it has absolutely been an integral part of the relationship that I have with my dogs. It's something that I know will bring anybody that's thinking about doing dog sports or is in dog sports a massive amount of joy. But that is definitely a path that can be filled with challenges, and challenges aren't a reflection of you being a good or bad trainer. It's part of the process of success and exceeding your goal. Again, be aligned with the goal that you want is enhancing the relationship that you have with your dog. We talked about that in greater detail with Kat yesterday, about the importance of realizing that we are training our dogs for dog sports, primarily for our ego. And it's our obligation to make it as an enjoyable, as fun a process as it possibly can be. Sometimes we can all get a bit serious. That's something that I definitely fall foul to, and I've got to take a step back and realize, you know what, my dogs are only doing the best they can with the information I give them, with the environments that we put them in. And it's really important to remember that when we train our dogs, whether it be for life or a dog sport. So I don't think there's any other questions. I hope that this week has been helpful for people. The 5 lives are going to be available on my YouTube page indefinitely, so you can check them out retrospectively. And if you have a question, just post it on the comments section on the videos and I will pick them up. Again, if you're interested in signing up for any of the courses, I will share the links. But for now, whatever you're doing, enjoy the rest of your evening. It's been a really, really great week. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your questions. And thank you for your interest and positive comments about this topic. I hope it's been helpful. And I hope that in whatever dog sport that you partake in, you have an infinite amount of success. If I could be part of that journey, I'll be happy to make that happen. by all means, enjoy your dogs, take care, everybody, and have fun.